And here we go. We have liftoff. Propulsion continues to be nominal.
RCPA chamber pressure looks good.
Probably not. Roger, with planet.
Water towers fly! Yes!
Tango down to nominal.
Flight downside SPE off. Bring in SPE off. Off. It's orange!
Orange 45! Oh my god! Oh my god!
Décollage.
Look at this!
Put that in the big bag,
343 unfolds to go.
Indeed.
We rise together, back to the moon and beyond.
This methane would be igniting in the flare, correct?
Yikes. You bet. We don't need any more of these.
Good evening. Once again, you are looking live at Space Launch Complex 40 at the Cape Canaveral Space Force Station in Florida, where a Falcon 9 is once again ready to launch 23 more Starlink V2 mini satellites. And this booster is ready to add another, I believe, record here into the books. I am Sawyer Rosenstein. I will be your host for this evening / early morning stream here. And as always, I am joined by a veritable cohort of coherent co-hosts, including Ian Atkinson. Ian, how are you?
Doing great, Sawyer. Ready for a late night, but thankfully not too late night so far. Starlink, fingers and landing legs crossed. But yeah, another fun launch here around midnight Eastern time.
Yep. And of course, out in the field bringing us these views and surviving the mosquitoes is Max Evans. Max, how's it going?
Good morning, good evening, or good night, everybody, wherever you're watching from. And hello from a beautiful, almost morning on Florida Space Coast.
Anytime there's a rocket out at the Space Coast, it's beautiful, except during hurricane season.
That's
And-
also true.
Behind the scenes, pushing the buttons, pulling the levers, and making the magic happen is Patrick Cahoon. So we have a fun team for you tonight as we approach about T-minus 40 minutes now until tonight's launch. So we've got some really fun, exciting stuff for this one. Ian, let's start with the basics here, of course, first, of the mission itself. Can you give us a quick basic overview?
Yeah, so right now, as you mentioned, Sawyer, we're looking at Pad 40 here at Cape Canaveral Space Force Station. Now, for those unaware, Pad 40 is one of 3 Falcon 9 pads that SpaceX has, 2 in Florida and 1 in California. Slick 40 is really SpaceX's workhorse pad. It has been cranking out launch after launch with only a few days turnaround in between. So right now, Falcon 9 is going to be launching 23 Starlink V2 mini satellites into orbit in just under 39 minutes here. Now, that's going to be placing them into an initial 285 by 293 kilometer low Earth orbit. Now, that's a very low parking orbit just to deploy the satellites into for checkouts. And then after the satellites complete their checkouts, they will bring themselves up to a 530 kilometer circular orbit inclined at 43 degrees. So about a medium latitude orbit, nothing too crazy there. Now, this is going to be flying, like you said, on Falcon 9 booster 1058. So the famous worm logo booster, the booster that has the best NASA logo on the side of it, is launching the mission tonight. Now, this will be its 19th flight after several, it's been about almost 4 years now. This booster has been active since May of 2020 when it launched SpaceX Crew Demo 2. So the first crewed mission that SpaceX ever flew was flown by this booster right here. So pretty important launch tonight. 19th flight of a booster. Like you said, I believe this is the first time that has ever happened. SpaceX continuing to break their own records here. So just some casually breaking records here at about 12:30 in the morning Eastern time. So that's what we'll be looking forward to tonight in just under 38 minutes.
Very casually, yes. And I do want to point out that it has both the worm and the meatball, thank you very much.
You're right. So it has the best of both worlds.
There you go. Thank you, Hannah Montana.
I never watched that show. Moving on.
I think that's a song of hers. I don't know. I listen to classic rock music normally, so...
No, same here.
Anyway. So, of course, with this being the 19th flight, the goal is to recover it. And so, Max, what do we have downrange ready for this?
So stationed about 629 kilometers downrange in the Ocean, Swai the Bahamas, is the drone ship just read the instructions. Stationed, as I said, about 629 kilometers downrange. And tonight, the fairings will be recovered by SpaceX's fleet vessel, Bob. So, it's all seems very routine, and it is. But for some reason, tonight just has a different feel about it, being 10:58 and all. If I may elaborate a little bit,
You may.
10:58. Of course, as Ian has already stated, this will be its 19th flight, and it is already the Falcon 9 fleet leader from both coasts. We are pushing completely uncharted territory for Falcon, and we're not sure if SpaceX is pushing Falcon 9 to failure or if they are planning on retiring the boosters after 20 flights. Hopefully not. Hopefully they will keep going until Falcon 9. Well, hopefully they keep going to figure and or what Falcon 9's flight limit would be. But with it being B1058 and all, with how it's probably the single most beloved booster in the entire fleet. Hopefully nothing goes wrong, and I don't want to set a precedent of something will go wrong. But we are in completely unknown territory with Falcon right now. So this may seem like on the outside just like any other Starlink mission, but it doesn't feel that way here.
That is a good point, and I know Julia has been advocating hard for this booster to survive and end up in a museum. Because again, as you mentioned, this first mission for this was in 2020 when it launched Demo 2, which was the first time that astronauts had launched from American soil since STS-135, the final shuttle mission in 2011. So a very historic booster already, and I'm advocating that hopefully they retire this one after 20, and we'll see if they continue others beyond 20 flights, but that's just my personal opinion on that. Now, I do want to acknowledge people that at the moment, we will not be able to show your messages on the bottom of the screen because YouTube is being lovely tonight, but we can still see your questions if you tag them at NASA Spaceflight, and we are still seeing your super chats, I promise. So I do want to acknowledge Musical Wolves saying, for those out in the field, thank you for being outstanding to give us views. Get it? Outstanding and outstanding.
Ah,
I appreciate pun token for you, Musical
suck-ups.
Wolves.
Suck-ups.
Bruh.
Tonight, you just summarized tonight's stream in one word. Just saying, bruh. Dalen Hardy gifted a red team membership. John Depker gifting 10 memberships. Sam Halter saying, really enjoyed the Firefly launch. Did the CRS mission return? Yes, CRS 29 returned earlier today with some of the science aboard the International Space Station that came back. So as of right now, again, Crew Dragon is currently the only vehicle that has, as they like to call it, downmass capability. Basically meaning they lift things up and bring them back. Others, they lift things up and kind of burn them up. So
Actually, if I'm not mistaken, splashdown occurred like I think it was minutes from Firefly Alpha taking flight. I could be wrong, but
Yes.
I think it was in within 2 or 3 minutes, which was incredible timing.
That was correct, yeah.
oh yeah. And then we have, I'd rather be flying an X-Wing. Oh no. Does this have a stubby nozzle? Or a real nozzle?
Pardon
Ian.
me, a real
Yeah,
nozzle.
so Max, I'm sorry, Max. I'm trying to answer this question. I'm trying to answer our viewers' questions. So this has a real Merlin vacuum nozzle. None of this like fake, half 1/3 Merlin, crap. This is the full Merlin nozzle on board. So no stubby nozzle here. This is the full Merlin vacuum nozzle. And if anyone's confused about what we're saying here, it's a running joke because SpaceX on their second stage is they have 2 types of nozzles for the Merlin vacuum engine. You have the regular nozzle, which is flying today, and the stubby nozzle. The stubby nozzle has a bit less performance, both a bit less thrust and a bit less efficiency, but it requires much less materials to make. And the materials to make the nozzle, which are a niobium alloy, are not only a rare material, and combined with Falcon 9's launch rate, you don't want to throw away too much of a rare material, but it's also expensive and it takes time to make. So they'll use a stubby nozzle when they don't need full performance to save some time, resources, and money.
I just saw someone in chat call it the NARF nozzle, like for Pinky in the Brain NARF, and I kind of love it. Sorry, Max.
No, you're not.
Correct, I'm not sorry. And then we've got one here from Andrew Berg saying, watching from an A320, should be able to see it from the air. Okay, that's awesome. To be able to see launches from the air, that's got to be really cool. So, I won't judge that it's an Airbus, but really nice. And Airbertac, I hope I'm pronouncing that right. Pun tokens for Sawyer. Thank you for being here. Well, I very much appreciate the pun tokens. And the other thing that I appreciate is the numbering will finally be back on track, because we have had Starlink 6-31, 33, and 34. Tonight we're finally getting back on track with Starlink 6-32. And just a minor detail, but I do like that little aspect of it.
Also, Sawyer, something that I wanted to talk about really quickly, because we mentioned this is B1058. This is the fleet leader for Falcon. It's coming up, or this is going to be its 19th flight, which is breaking insane reuse records. My math is wrong. 8 years ago, last night, so now it's past midnight now on the East Coast. 8 years ago last night, the first Falcon 9 landed successfully. It was launched from this exact same launch pad. It was the Orbcomm OG2 mission, the 20th flight of Falcon 9. And on that mission, B1019. So think about that. We're looking at 1058 right here. B1019 was launched on its first flight, and it did the first ever successful return to launch site landing of a Falcon 9 booster and the first recovery of a Falcon 9 booster at all. I just thought that was kind of fun how now on the kind of the day after the 8th anniversary of that, we're looking at another fleet leader kind of expansion here on the Falcon 9 fleet. And, 8 years ago, most people in the industry, let alone I'm sure a lot of people at SpaceX as well, would be shocked to see how far along we are now with reuse and how Starship is now really hitting the ground running thanks to what Falcon 9 is doing on the the recovery front. And I just wanted to bring that up because I thought that was a really neat milestone and important date that we just passed.
I'm going to follow up on that in just a second, but I do want to acknowledge that we can see some frost on the vehicle, and SpaceX confirming propellant load has begun for tonight's launch. All systems and weather are currently go. Just wanted to acknowledge that. But in terms of a follow-up for that, hi, Jake. There we go. Sorry. Jake hopped on my lap for the 6th time already this stream. In terms of following up with that, I mean, I don't know. I totally forgot what I was going to say. That's what.
And it's fun too because looking back on that, 8 years ago, I was watching that in my basement. That was like one of the first rocket launches I ever watched live, and seeing that rocket land was the reason that I've now chosen to go into aerospace engineering. I'm about to graduate college now with that degree because of a launch 8 years ago last night of this rocket from this launch pad. It's so amazing to see things kind of wrapping on both like on an industry wide thing, but also on like a bit of a personal note. And I don't know, it's really like touching to see that and think about that.
And yes, for those who are saying that Jake interrupted a pun, he did. I remembered both things I was going to say. First, it's quite appropriate that it was OG2 was the OG1 landing.
Okay.
No boy.
The second thing I was going to mention, though, is that we have this question here from Booster 13 saying, do you think we could see a newer version of Falcon 9? Because these boosters are pretty old, so they might start to not be as reliable as they used to be. And Max, I'm going to throw that one to you in a second, but I do want to mention that just a few days ago, they were finishing testing up B1083 at McGregor, Texas, which you can watch the testing McGregor Live 24/7. But in terms of numbers, you said that was, 1019, and now we're already creating booster 1083. But
Yeah.
what do you think, Max? Do you think there'll be a newer development, or do they just keep building more?
I was actually going to mention how we were now in the low to mid 1080s now in terms of Falcon 9 first stage boosters. SpaceX still is pushing boundaries on flights like this, and they are really pushing to see what these Merlin 1Ds can do in terms of their performance margins, and the data from that can be applied to future missions beyond Starlinks, and that's actually how NASA and SpaceX have agreed to now perform a return to launch site trajectory with the first stage now for crewed and cargo missions. But in terms of seeing a brand new Falcon 9, other than brand new first stages rolling production facility in Hawthorne, I don't think so because to sound cliche, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And Falcon 9 has proven time and time again, especially this year, having flown so much, that it is one of the most, if not the most, reliable and uh, the quickest, or it is able to be turned around the quickest of any rocket in history. So I think at the moment, no. Beyond minor tweaks in the Merlins, I don't think so.
Yeah, I mean, once they've got to Falcon 9 Block 5 1.2, which is what we're currently seeing flying, I think they kind of realized, all right, we've got something that's working here, so might as well stick with it. So
Yeah.
that's, yeah. What were
And we
you
know
going to say?
they've been. I know that they've been doing minor tweaks and upgrades because we've seen newer boosters have quicker turnaround times. Newer boosters have slight differences on say the bolt patterns for the intrastage or camera placement. They can loft more Starlink satellites into orbit. It's not like we're not talking 5-10 tons of extra payload, but squeezing out kilograms and maybe half a ton here and there. And SpaceX has gone from launching, I think they started with 21 V2 satellites, now up to 23. And of course, that's in combination with lightening the satellites themselves. But there are some portions of that are due to Falcon 9 improvements. And SpaceX has said there's going to be no Block 6. There's going to be no major upgrades. There's not going to be a Merlin 1E. But there are still minor tweaks here and there just to get what they can out of the system while most of their engineering force is working on Starship and Starlink and Dragon.
And by the way, I should point out, not only are they lightening them, they're darkening them as well, so that they aren't as obtrusive in the night sky.
That makes my telescopes happy.
And it's also worth noting that SpaceX actually had to lock down the design of the Block 5 Falcon 9, I think 2 or 3 years before it first flew crew, satisfy certain NASA regulations and criteria. Because I don't, of course, I don't think you want to keep flying astronauts on what would technically be an experimental first stage or rocket in the first place over and over and over again.
That's a really good point. Yeah, once a vehicle is crew rated, any major changes or significant upgrades, you've got to present it to NASA and all the people that'll be flying people on it and basically recertify everything again. So, well, most things again, I should say. So that's also worth noting there. Alex Vives saying they should retire B-1058 after 20 flights and give her to either Kennedy Space Center or Smithsonian. I agree completely.
Yes.
I mean, right
Agreed.
now, Kennedy does have a booster. Space Center Houston has a booster. There is now a booster out in Colorado, I believe it is.
Yep. At the Dish Network headquarters in Denver, outside of Denver.
So it would find a good spot. I mean, Smithsonian might work, actually. For Udvar Hazy.
I was about to say, I would love to see it either next to Discovery or hanging on the ceiling above Discovery, like how they have at Kennedy.
Oh,
wouldn't that be
yeah.
amazing? Maybe even landing legs deployed or something. I don't know. But they did previously offer a booster to Smithsonian, but they charged I think it was $1 million or so for transport costs and things along those lines, and that was just too much for the Smithsonian at the time. Maybe they could do a fundraising thing or save up some money for that, or maybe SpaceX eventually will be like, hey, we don't care, just take it. I want to see important vehicles to spaceflight like these preserved. And yeah, I think there's really nowhere better than the Smithsonian, especially the Udvar Hazy Center.
You mean $1 million.
$1 million. I did put my pinky in my mouth.
I did too. And another idea, I don't know if it would fit super well, but I'm sure Alicia would be happy to have one on the Intrepid as well. Just throwing it out there. Let's see here. We are now about 22 and a half minutes or so away from tonight's launch. I don't know if we actually went through the whole details of. I know we said it's going down range, but for those that are wanting to go out there to see it, Max, what is the trajectory tonight? And also, how's the weather looking down there too?
So overall, it's heading on a 43 degree inclination tonight. So that means it is heading on a southeastern trajectory toward the Bahamas. So if you are south of Cape Canaveral, say Vero Beach, Fort Lauderdale, Miami area, assuming the weather is playing nice and you have clear sky. And if you look to the north, you should be able to see tonight's launch no problem at all. And it's also worth noting that if you are north of here, say in Daytona Beach or Jacksonville, you should also see it, but it will look a lot. The arch or the path of travel that Falcon 9 will take will look smaller than compared if you were south of the launch pad. And you should also be able to see it if you are over in the Tampa Clearwater area as well on a clear night, of course. So assuming weather plays nice, and assuming the weather plays nice wherever you are in Florida, there's a really good chance you might be able to see it.
And how is the weather by you at the Cape right now in terms of your ability to track the flight tonight?
Yeah. So weather for the most part today has been kind of gloomy, especially in the evening here. It was raining quite a lot. A front came in from the Atlantic and kind of got everything wet. Currently, there's still a bit of overcast. The moon is being out, but the east and toward the Atlantic critically, the skies are looking a lot clearer and the winds have died down substantially. There's a bit of a breeze coming out from the east right now, but I would say the weather and conditions tonight are trending in the right direction.
There we go. And yes, we did get the tweet earlier saying that so far weather is go. And in about 20 seconds or so, we really should get a good indication of the wind and how windy it is and what direction it's going, as we are now approaching the best vent, the T minus 20 minute, 20-second vent. And as that vent is about to begin in 5 seconds, Trevor, first off, what is the best vent? And second off, why is it the best vent?
Trevor.
I'm sorry, Ian.
I get we both have smooth, buttery voices, but man, I thought we were friends, Sawyer. Anyway, the vent that
I'm
you can see.
sorry.
No,
Blame
you're
the
fine.
bookshelves.
I don't even know what that means, but I'm going to pretend I didn't hear that. So that vent coming from around the middle of the vehicle right there, and first off, either the wind is coming towards us or there is no wind. So that's a good indication right there. But either way, that is a T minus 20-minute vent. Now that is when they're starting to chill down the transporter, clean out the lines as they are about to begin second stage liquid oxygen loading. Now this is about a 3 to 4 minute vent because liquid oxygen loading on the second stage starts at T minus 16 minutes. So for the next 3 minutes and 37 seconds, we're going to see a bit of venting coming out of the middle of the transporter there. They're chilling down and cleaning out the lines with some inert liquid nitrogen before they start flowing liquid oxygen through those umbilicals up there. So that's a great indicator that we are on time in the countdown, and it is, like I said, this is a great kind of indicator that we are on time. There's no holds in the countdown, and that they're still continuing to launch in just over 19 minutes.
There you go. And Ian, I greatly apologize. Mr. Ian Atkinson here, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you, Sawyer.
You're welcome.
The Aries One fan club will forgive you.
Yeah, I may or may not have slandered them in the most recent ad that aired on Twist today, but yeah. Let's just say I'll admit it now. It wasn't an actual Aries 1X fan club letter. It was just a blank envelope, but I still don't always trust the Aries 1 fan club.
We're watching you. We're watching you.
I'm not surprised. Here's a great way to put this question, because now with the kind of smirking emoji here, Max, Kyler is asking, what are the 5 towers?
Oh, good lord. When I first joined the team back in March or April, on my very first stream, somebody asked the question, and I came down to the conclusion that the only sufficient answer to that question from here on out was just yes. But I'm feeling nice, and I will answer the question entirely. So the four kind of skinnier towers on the pad perimeter, those are towers designed and built to take lightning strikes away from the actual launch pad itself, or the launch pad structure where Falcon 9 sits. And they have catenary wires that run from the very tips, and they also link in between. And those wires run down to the ground to disperse the charge away from any of these systems and the tower and the rocket itself. And the brand new tower in the middle that is currently in a blanket of vapor right now from that T minus 20-minute vent is SpaceX's brand new crew access tower that was recently assembled here over the last 3 or 4 months. All of these segments were assembled rather quickly, actually, over at the Hangar X Roberts Road facility here at the Kennedy Space Center. And in what seemed no time at all, broadly speaking, compared to, I guess, the timeline of a whole year. They built the entire tower up, and then they eventually fitted the crew access arm, and now the tower looks to be nearly finished, if not completely finished. It is not yet operational. They have not flown crew from it yet. We are still waiting to see who and when that first crew will be and when they will fly. Um, but that is SpaceX's brand new crew access tower over at Slick 40.
Yeah, normally, again, like you said, it's kind of a jokey question, but that's the first time I've ever heard it asked as the 5 towers now that we have the crew access tower there. So I
Yes.
had to bring that up. Here's a question from what do we have here? The MDW Aviator with a question. I'll pose it to everyone. How many more flights do you think this booster will fly? Ian, we'll start with you.
Ooh, that's a really tough one when you don't really have, insight into how the booster is even performing. I could see them retiring it at 20 just for, like you said, this booster is very historic. It's an important vehicle that did a lot of stuff for the American space program. It got the first U.S. astronauts off of U.S. soil in almost 10 years. So I could see them finishing up at 20, being like, okay, we learned a lot from this. It's an older booster. We've improved a lot of things on newer boosters, but at the same time, I could also see them, just pushing it until either it fails to land or they're like, okay, these tanks are structurally compromised at, say, I don't know, 27 launches. We're not going to launch anymore. So I feel like they're going to push it, to be honest. Just keep going until there's too much of risk to even Starlinks to launch it.
How many do you think, Max?
It's kind of a difficult question to answer. I want to say that they will retire this booster specifically after 20 flights, but that's just me being optimistic towards this booster itself and wishing it would be put toward a museum. Um, but what I think is more likely going to happen, SpaceX is going to, of course, recertify the boosters after, excuse me, they are going to recertify this booster after 20 flights to see if it is sound to fly more. And then I would believe that they will push for 25 and then potentially 30, assuming it makes it to 25 successfully. Um, but like I said earlier, we are in completely unknown territory with Falcon right now, and with this, I don't want to say older design because it is getting on towards 4 years old now. It it's very very similar to even the boosters made today. So imagine it should get through tonight, no problem. But I'm hoping they end up retiring it. They end up retiring it after 20. If not after 20, then I would say probably upwards of 25 to 30 flights.
Yeah, I'm hoping this one ends at 20 because you still have, I believe it's 1061 that is at 18 flights as well. So
1060, and I think that one's holding
1060.
at 17 flights. Yeah.
Yeah, so you've got one that's pretty darn close to that amount of flights. I think my personal thing would be to retire this one at 20 and then maybe keep pushing the next one though for 25 or 30.
Yeah, they haven't flown 1060 in a minute, which is quite peculiar because with the last few flights, especially up to and past 15, 1060 has always followed 1058 flying, and it hasn't, of course, these last couple of times. So it makes you wonder if they found something in either the tank structure or the thrust puck or the Merlins or something in 1060 that either needed much more time to repair or refurbish. If they have just flat out retired it and scrapped it already. We don't know. But we do know that we haven't seen the booster or 1060 out here at the Cape in quite a while. So it makes you wonder.
Yeah, I just looked it up on Next Space Flight's reuse page. So shameless plug there. They have every single Falcon booster and every single reusable spacecraft that's ever flown. And 1060 this year has flown in January, early January, mid July, and mid September, and that is it. So pretty low flight rate this year for 1060. And like you said, Max, I wonder if they found something or if they're just not really prioritizing refurbishment because they have better boosters to work on. I'm not really sure.
And it's so weird because that last flight in September feels like last week, but here we are, almost at the very end of 2023. So
Yeah.
With this fast cadence, time goes by really fast.
And then meanwhile on the West Coast, 1061, which is one of the West Coast boosters, flew in early March, late April, late May, late August, late October, and early December. Like that's been just grinding stuff out for an early booster. That's pretty impressive, I think. But I digress.
Yeah, like you're saying, so the last flight of B1060 was September 23rd, 2023. This booster is only 49 days since its last flight, so that would mean November 3rd of 2023, just kind of for reference there. We are continuing to count down now 11 and a half minutes till the scheduled liftoff of the Starlink 6-32 mission. And I do want to thank some more support here. Kyle Trick saying, Austin Powers! Yes, they are fantastic movies, gotta say. Then we have Steve Kalovic, hopefully I'm pronouncing that right, who gifted 10 NSF memberships. Thank you very much for doing that. And then, Max, I think this is a good question for you and I here. McGregor cows versus Cape alligators. Thoughts from John Depker?
I think the alligators would be very happy to have food. So,
Ooh.
yeah, I hate to be morbid, but that's just the way nature rolls. So I think the alligators would be very happy to have food.
Oh, for sure. And John Depker, thank you again, a name we see often here for the support tonight. Apologies that we can't show him on screen, but still very, very appreciative of that. Here's a really good question. And Max, I'll put this one to you because, again, we've seen kind of the booster processing a bunch. How long does it take to get a rocket out of the building where they build them, so in the HIF in this case, to the pad to launch them? And that's from Jonathan Coleman.
Oh boy, I don't have an exact timeline on it. I think the fastest turnaround we've seen from a booster would be. I think Alex should be in the back channel here, helping us out a little bit if he's there. I want to say it's around 20 to 25 days for a booster turnaround, and that was when they were really cranking out turnarounds. Either I think it was early this year or late last year. They haven't had the need to do that as of late. I think towards the second half of this year because the fleet of Falcon 9 boosters they have here it's a very large it's a very large fleet, especially compared to launch sites like Vandenberg. It can be as little as I think 20 to 25 days, but in terms of boosters that are as worn or as flown as 1058 or 1060, it can be upwards of 2 to 3 months just to go over and look for any microfractures in the tanks, make sure all the engines are still operating properly, checking over all the systems, the hydraulics, the grid fins, the interstage, the second stage pusher. So much to look over, but the newer boosters I'm sure are far easier to refurbish and recertify for flight. And I'm sure 1058 and 1060 are probably, I would assume, probably not the easiest. So it takes anywhere from I think 20 days to 3 months.
There we go. And I mean, once it gets into the HIF, the horizontal integration facility, and they mate the payloads to it, I mean, they can roll it out the same day as launch. But getting
really
to that point takes a while.
Yes, absolutely, and that's what they have been doing with the Starlinks. Is that the rockets for Starlinks will be going vertical anywhere from 3 to 6 hours before launch, and for other launches for other customers that can be anywhere from 12 hours to a day. So these Starlinks are really showing how rapidly that they can put Falcon 9 together and roll it out and send it into the sky. So anywhere from 3 to 6 hours, I would assume.
It's gotten a lot quicker, that's for sure. It used to be out there for days, but then again, they're also averaging sometimes 3 days or so between launches. So obviously, it's getting a lot quicker at getting it out there, getting it vertical, and getting it ready. We are now about 7.5 minutes away from the scheduled liftoff, and at 7 minutes is when the engine chill down begins. So, Ian, why do we chill the engines?
Yeah, so this actually goes into a bit of material science here. So if you think about it, if you have like a really hot plate, say a really hot glass plate, you don't want to pour cold water over that plate because that will crack or it'll shatter the plate even. That's thermal shock. And what we're really looking at here is kind of that, but on a much, much larger scale. So these engines here are made out of metal. They're made out of an Inconel alloy, which is a very, it's a very thermally resistant alloy, great for use in engines. And the problem arises if you suddenly slam liquid oxygen into the cooling vanes on the engine. Now, the outer nozzle of the engine, the outer wall of the nozzle, has kind of fluid pipelines inside the wall of the nozzle. That's what's called regenerative cooling. And what they do, they will flow liquid oxygen around those to, or it's either liquid oxygen or RP1. I can't believe I'm forgetting this now. But either way, they'll flow a propellant through the outer walls of the engine to cool the nozzle so the nozzle does not melt. Now, what they're doing here, they're beginning to flow liquid oxygen through the nozzle and through the engine to slowly chill it down to temperature so it's not a massive rush and a massive thermal shock right at engine ignition when they go full throttle on the turbo pumps. So they're beginning to slowly trickle some liquid oxygen through the engine to get it slowly down to temperature, and that's going to happen over the next few minutes here.
It is the locks, I believe, but yes. And speaking of chill, Max, you've been pretty chill out there, but I know things are about to heat up, so I will let you go and get ready to shoot the launch.
Oh goodness. But it is that time again, everybody. Thank you very much, gentlemen, and I will see you on the other side.
See you, Max.
Sounds good. Well, we won't actually see him, we'll hear him, but still. Uh, let's see here. We have support from James Kirk saying Starlink LEO data centers next. I know there's already been discussions now of creating the first data center in low Earth orbit. I think that's an interesting concept. What about you?
I think so too. Honestly, though, I don't really know what the purpose of it would be. I mean, especially in low Earth orbit, you would have maybe like 3 to 5 minutes as it passes over to get or receive data from it. I don't really know what the point of that would be, to be honest. Geostationary might make sense, so you have a constant line of sight with that, but maybe because I'm not too much on the satellite side of aerospace, I'm more interested in like the rocket side. I don't really see the application of that, but maybe there is some business case for that I'm just not seeing right now.
I guess also if you have the laser link similar to Starlink of being able to reach those data centers, because then you deal with latency when you get into geostationary orbit versus low Earth orbit.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, latency is a big issue there. Also, real quick, I want to correct myself on the last question about regenerative cooling. RP1 is used for cooling the nozzle of the
Oh,
engine.
thank you.
Yes, liquid oxygen is being explored for certain types of engines, but it is not in active use on a launch vehicle. Merlin uses RP1 cooling.
As we hit 4.5 minutes now until liftoff, the TE is set to retract a little bit. That is the transporter erector. The clamps will unclamp from around just underneath the payload fairing area, and it will go back just under 2 degrees. So, Ian, why is that, and what else is the TE doing at the moment? As we can see, those clamps have retracted.
Yeah, so like you said, the clamps are retracted and the strong back is going to recline approximately 2 degrees. Now, it's not really much that you'd be able to see on the live stream if you didn't know what you're looking for. Now, previous designs of the strong back, including the old strong back at Pad 40 before the unfortunate Amo 6 explosion, as well as the current transporter in use in Vandenberg, will retract much further from the rocket, around 20 degrees away from the rocket. And that's what the point of getting the transporter away from the rocket is to keep the umbilicals and the transporter structure itself away from the exhaust of the engines at liftoff. Now, the older ones would retract simply to around 20 degrees and stay there all the way through liftoff and for a few minutes thereafter. But these newer designs, including 39A and Pad 40 and probably Slick 6 out at Vandenberg as well, recline very slightly, only a degree or two, just a few minutes before launch. That's to get a little bit of spacing, and then right at liftoff, so right when the vehicle is released from the pad, the strongback will rapidly recline to about 45 degrees. That's much further back than 20 degrees, so that gives it a bit more separation from the vehicle, and that ensures that there's minimal damage to the pad systems. And having minimal damage to your pad systems is very important if you want to turn your pad around very rapidly, like what SpaceX wants to do. So this kind of lines up with their mission of quick turnaround for Falcon 9.
Exactly. And we should be getting confirmation of fueling starting to wrap up. We already have confirmation that Stage 1 LOX load is complete. That is the liquid oxygen oxidizer. And a reminder, the fuel portion of the propellant is RP1, rocket propellant 1, which is a refined form of kerosene. You can also be able to tell when they finish things off on the second stage, as you will see one more vent that is purging, I believe, nitrogen through the lines to get rid of any excess gas that could ignite as the vehicle flies past it.
Yep, and that kind of lines up with what I was talking about you want to, not damage your transporter, and as part of that, you don't want to have explosive things inside your transporter when, there's a little bit of heat going by it, you might say.
Exactly. We
And
are now about 90 seconds away, which is when we should see that vent. And we have confirmation that Stage 2 LOX load is complete, so liquid oxygen loaded up into both stages fully.
we just passed T90. We're going to see some venting kind of slow down here a bit as they finish purging all the lines. And sorry, it looks interesting. I don't know if it's not that humid tonight or if the wind is hitting it just right, but this vehicle's not that frosty. Maybe it's just me, though.
It's also super sooty, given this being its 19th flight, so that may be part of it too.
Interesting.
We are now approaching T-minus 1 minute at this point. All of the tanks inside are pressurized to flight pressure. In addition to that, Falcon 9 enters startup, meaning that the onboard flight computer begins all the final pre-launch checks and will take control of the countdown here from this point on. And at this moment, at T-minus 45 seconds, they should be hearing word if they are go or no-go from the launch director for tonight's launch. We have the go for launch as we approach T-minus 30 seconds to liftoff. Once we pass T-minus 0, we will be quiet at that point and let you hear the sounds of the launch. And we will come back after that so you can enjoy it. But we will continue to count you down here, about 15 seconds to go. We now are going to keep an eye on the base of the rocket. We should look for a green flash. That is the T-tab that will ignite the engines. And that will be engine startup, followed a few seconds later by liftoff. We have engine ignition. And liftoff of Starlink 6-32, the booster making its 19th flight. Go, Starlink V2 Minis, go. Quite the crackly launch tonight. Beautiful sound and a beautiful launch of Booster 1058 on its 19th liftoff there. We have already passed through max Q, that is maximum aerodynamic pressure on the vehicle, and it is now traveling faster than the speed of sound as well. In about 45 seconds, we will have 3 events coming up in rapid succession. That will be MECO, which is main engine cutoff, when the 9 Merlin engines will shut down, followed a few seconds later by stage separation. And then following that, the second stage Merlin vacuum engine will ignite in SES1, which is second engine start 1.
This is one of my favorite parts of launch here, when you get the plume expansion as the vehicle gets closer and closer to the vacuum of space. Right now, Falcon 9 is getting into the uppermost parts of Earth's atmosphere. Because of the low pressure, its plume is expanding. You're getting that beautiful blue color as we approach main engine cutoff here. And right at second stage engine start, in just a few seconds, we'll see some nice plumes.
And that appears to be MECO.
Yep.
We will have. Here's the view from SpaceX's angle. We are a few seconds ahead of their stream there. Their stage separation. And there we go. Ignition of the Merlin vacuum engine on the second stage.
Beautiful. And look how sooty the interior of that inner stage is.
True. And also, look at. I believe that's the plasma going up against that as the grid fins come out, right?
It is. That is the second stage plume they're interacting. Now, for those of
Ah.
you watching along at home, keep an eye out on those grid fins in about 3-4 minutes. When this first stage goes through reentry, those grid fins light up pretty bright, and it's a gorgeous sight. That rhymed.
Very nice. And we also have payload fairing jettison. Those will now actually parachute back down after re-entering the atmosphere to be recovered by Bob downrange waiting for them. We had a really gorgeous view there for a little bit as well of the moon jellyfish, which, what is the jellyfish for those who hadn't seen something like that before?
Yeah, so the jellyfish is a pretty rare phenomena in spaceflight. At least the more prominent jellyfish for certain launches. I'll explain that in a second. But what the jellyfish is around dusk or around dawn, when the sun is below the horizon, but it's close enough to the horizon that when the vehicle launches to the east, the sun it makes its way into the sunlight, and since it's dark at the launch site, you see a really beautiful and bright plume, which looks like a jellyfish. You can see a very dim version of the jellyfish here, lit only by the second stage engine's plume, and I think the moon as well is playing a part here. But if this happened closer to sunset, so say about like an hour after sunset or an hour before sunrise, that would be a very beautiful plume expansion there. If you want to see that after the stream, check our live stream of the Inspiration 4 launch. That had a beautiful jellyfish effect when that lifted off about 2 years ago now? Year ago?
2021.
2 years ago, geez. But yeah, anyway, Inspiration 4 had a beautiful jellyfish. After this first stage lands and the second stage engine cuts off, be sure to check out our live stream of that.
We are getting confirmation so far they are on nominal trajectory, or norminal, continuing exactly as it needs to. And at this point, you will also notice in the bottom left, stage 1, the altitude is now starting to decrease. So it has reached the peak of its flight and is now on its way downward. It will be picking up a whole bunch of speed on the way down as well, but it will be able to burn that off in the entry burn that will be coming up in a little over a minute or so here. So I know we always talk about that entry burn is fighting fire with fire, so how exactly does it slow itself down that way?
Yeah, so it uses a method. It's a very simple word, and you will be quizzed on this. So remember, it's called supersonic retropropulsion, and it's a study that NASA actually did for Mars landings, probably back in the 90s or early 2000s. And basically, it's using the plumes of your engine exhaust as a heat shield. I mean, if you think about it, the plume is matter. It is something that can, push away plasma and ionization, which you get during reentry. So during the maximum point of atmospheric entry, they reignite 3 of the first stage's Merlin engines to act as a sort of makeshift heat shield for just a few seconds. It also gives you the nice side effect of slowing you down a little bit, because I mean, the first stage is going at almost 8,000 kilometers per hour. You want to slow down. This thing is about to slam into the atmosphere.
And speaking of, there is the ignition of that entry burn with the 3 engines.
Oh,
Look
we're
at that,
getting-
also capturing it from our ground cameras.
Yep. Very quick burn there.
Looked absolutely beautiful. As you saw in real time, we saw the shutdown. In the delayed stream here, you will see the shutdown happening momentarily there as well. And as mentioned, it slowed it down quite a bunch so far. Now, the next thing that will help it slow it down really is the atmosphere. As it gets
Yep.
into that thicker part of the atmosphere, it will help create enough drag to slow it down some more, which is also when those grid fins will become useful, because then they are used to help steer and maneuver the vehicle inside the thicker part of the atmosphere.
And speaking of those grid fins, keep an eye on the left-hand side camera view. You might see a little bit of plasma there building up around the grid fins, depending on their trajectory and how the mission. There we go. Look at the
You
right
see
side
it on
of
the
that.
right side, yeah.
Yep.
The right side is the left box.
Yep. Yeah.
So next up will be a landing burn that will hopefully have it touch down safely on just read the instructions downrange. Meanwhile, a few seconds after that, we should have SECO 1, or second engine cutoff 1, when that Merlin vacuum engine will shut down for the first time. It will then reignite about 45 minutes later for the final burn to get these satellites into their final orbit and deployment. So they'll be coming up any moment now. Keep an eye on the left side of the screen. There's a chance you might also just see a light in the distance, which will be that drone ship downrange. And hoping here for a successful 19th landing. Now under 1,000 kilometers an hour, 3 kilometers off the deck.
She is still screaming in.
And there we go. There is the landing burn.
Now that is the center engine, so 1 out of the 9 engines has reignited. You can see the grid fins there doing some last-minute maneuvering to keep this thing in line, and there's the drone ship through the clouds.
Beautiful. And we should have the landing leg deploy. We do. And touchdown. History is made once again as B-1058 launches and lands successfully for the 19th time.
Incredible. Like, what a milestone that is. And of course, we have a primary mission here, the second stage, which is about to hit second stage engine cutoff. And there it is.
There we go. That's SECO 1. Now, let's head down to field commentator number 1. Max, how was that?
That was such a relief to hear that it landed successfully because, of course, we cannot see that here from the press site here at the Kennedy Space Center. And I was holding my breath a little bit on the way up because it looked a little bit slow. I didn't see any engines go out, but maybe that was just me being overly worrisome and my eyes just deceiving me. But from this perspective, it looked a little bit slow at times. But it otherwise, I think it was okay. Maybe it was just my mind playing tricks on me. But that was absolutely beautiful. The clouds cleared out just in the nick of time, at least over where the rocket was traveling. And it was absolutely gorgeous. The air is pretty stagnant around here now, but it is cooler and it is thicker, so the sound transmitted a lot easier and a lot more clearly, as you probably heard through our microphones. Never gets old, man. That never gets old. And one thing that I'm still trying to get used to after it happens after every single night launch, when it's just maybe 3 or 4 of us out here over at the KSC. The KSC security, all the gators around us. After the sound passes, we can hear probably between 3 to 5 of those alligators bellowing as they are not the happiest to be awoken, probably. And there was one probably 30 feet off to my left in the water here, which was kind of alarming, I guess one could say. But hey, this is their home. This is their home. So always love hearing it, but that was beautiful as always.
Yeah, so for the people who are asking about the cows versus the alligators, the cows don't care as much about rocket launches. The alligators do when you wake them up.
And to think, gators and crocodiles can live for a long time. So some of the larger guys out here have probably been out since maybe they've been here since the very beginning. Since Mercury, and they've seen a ton. And maybe they're getting quite quite angry at SpaceX for flying so often and disturbing them.
Yeah. And if my numbers are correct here, that is the 181st consecutive successful landing for SpaceX and their 255th booster landing all time.
And with that, 1058 is now 1058-20.
Golly, that is so weird to hear.
I know. My one friend actually just shout out to Philip. He DM'd me. He was like, "Yeah, 1058-20." I'm like, that's weird to read. Like, that just doesn't make sense. Even
if you sorry to cut you off, Ian, but even if you go back almost 4 years now since this booster first flight, flying 10 times seemed ridiculous and almost unfathomable.
Yeah.
And now we're at nearly 20 flights now on this exact booster, and it's as far as we can tell, it's still running like clockwork, which is just remarkable.
That is so weird. It's so weird to hear that and say that, but it's great.
And it's approaching. Sawyer, you're the shuttle man. Was it 33 flights that Discovery made?
I believe
it was in the 30s.
it was definitely, I think it was 37. Let me double check.
39.
39. Yeah.
The best shuttle always at it. But yeah, so there was still a
Sorry.
while off.
Ian, good man. Good man.
Yeah,
No.
thank you, Max. Thank you, Max.
Team
So
Endeavor.
it's a little over halfway of the way to beating Space Shuttle Discovery. I mean, I highly doubt that 1058 will beat Discovery in terms of turnaround time, but even, being in the realm of almost Discovery levels of flights is just incredible. Like, what an
Well,
achievement that is.
that being said, Discovery probably still has a little bit more flight time,
Oh,
all things
yes.
considered.
Endeavor only has 25 flights, so it's catching up, actually. I think there's
Those are rookie numbers.
a chance that Endeavor could get beat by a Falcon 9.
May I remind you that Discovery did the 39 flights, but it started back in 1984. Endeavor was 1992, if I recall correctly. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Endeavor was kind of, the 1080 to Discovery's 1058, if I may.
That's probably the best SpaceX or shuttle this we've ever heard here at NASA Space Flight. That is amazing.
Compare
Ian, that
Endeavor
was
to booster
genius.
1080?
I mean, it's the newest vehicle. It doesn't have as many flights, but it's a newer vehicle, and it's, in terms of capability, maybe the best.
I'm
And
offended.
Discovery flew both return to flight missions. So enough said.
And it launched Hubble and did the most servicing missions to Hubble, which I love Hubble.
I'm sorry, but who
Mike-
repaired Hubble first so that it actually could see?
Well, that's not Discovery's fault.
Right,
That's
but
not
Endeavor made
Discovery's
it so
fault.
that Hubble actually works.
Who
Which
got
we had
Hubble
a
into
video
orbit?
on that, by the way, just
Who got
saying.
Hubble to orbit? I rest my case, Your Honor.
You'll have to see the video, by the way, on our channel about the repairs to Hubble, just saying. Because
Yeah.
And this is where
Never.
the stream goes downhill very quickly.
now, Ian, now I wish you were Trevor, because he's Team Endeavor.
Once again, a common expected Trevor L.
And also because Ian's here, Hoppy.
Hoppy.
Hoppy. Very happy to hear Hoppy.
Happy.
Anyway,
We need
we
NSF
did.
After Dark.
We do.
Oh.
We really do.
Yeah, I don't know. It might not be a safe for work rating, but yes. Anyway, right before liftoff, Andrew Berg, who was the one aboard the Airbus, saying, "Dang it, we're landing 4 minutes before launch." Well, hopefully, you got to see a little bit of it, or maybe once you landed and you had the cell service, you got to see it. So, hopefully for that. Oh man, that is a beautiful launch, and I believe if you count Starship, that is the 95th SpaceX launch this year. So close as we are 8 days away from the end of the year. But they do have another launch coming up very soon, right, Ian?
Yes, of course. I mean, as always, SpaceX has launches coming up basically, the day after or the next day. So we have the Sarah or the Sara, I don't know how you want to pronounce that, Sarah 2 and 3 launching from Vandenberg later today in less than 8 hours. So go to sleep, get your rest, and be up by 8:11 Eastern Time because Falcon 9 is back at it again from Space Launch Complex 4 East at Vandenberg Space Force Base.
Might I
that'll be launch-
suggest getting up 40 minutes before that so that you can watch our live stream? Because, yes, surprise, we will be streaming a SpaceX launch from Vandenberg Space Force Base again.
Is that with Jack Beyer with NASA Spaceflight?
That is with Jack Bio's NASA Spaceflight, yes.
Yay.
So make sure you tune in for that. And if I recall, I believe that one's in our TLS.
It is. Yes, it's going back to landing zone 4. So that'll be a nice double whammy there. Beautiful liftoff and landing. Should the fog gods be on our side?
It's Worst Coast, so who knows?
I was just going to say, or not, because West Coast.
Yeah, come on. East Coast, Beast Coast. Let's go, guys.
Ooh, I like that.
Thank
you. Ian, spitting fire tonight.
East Coast, Beast Coast. That is the new official stance of all of us here.
And NASA Spaceflight says.
Anyway, Andrew Berg did say that they saw it for 5 seconds to cloud cover and, of course, the stream. But hey, 5 seconds, you got to see it at least. So
Yep.
It's better
That's
than no
awesome.
seconds.
Exactly. On that note, though, I think we can start wrapping things up here. I do want to point out when you were talking about which engines burn, I was looking at the shirt I'm wearing, which is my Falcon 9 launch entry landing shirt from shop.nasaspaceflight.com that outlines which order they actually go in. You can see all the 9 engines and the 3 engine burn, then the single engine. And look at Patrick already quick on the button with it. So definitely, if you want to rep your love for all of these Falcon 9s and the landings, check out shop.nasaspaceflight.com. I have been your host tonight, Sawyer Rosenstein, joined by Ian. Thank you for joining us, Ian.
Glad to be here on this chaotic stream. I love how Starlinks are slowly getting more and more unhinged, and I'm always here for it.
Yeah, well, I always like to say this isn't your ordinary Starlink, and tonight certainly wasn't with the record-setting booster.
Definitely.
And thank you to Max out in the field for the fantastic tracking work and commentary.
Pleasure having everybody along as always. And the reason why, or I guess one of the perks of our streams now getting crazier and crazier with these Starlinks is these late night Starlinks do be hitting different, as we love to say. Thank you very much, everybody, for tuning in.
Amen, brother.
They do be even hitting more different now. And once again, thanks to Patrick for pushing the buttons, pulling the levers, getting all that stuff up on screen super quick and the gorgeous views. Always appreciated. I have been your host, Sawyer Rosenstein. Thank you so much for watching, everybody. Don't forget, you can keep an eye on everything going on in the Space Coast on Space Coast Live 24/7. And we will see you back here in just a little bit for the Sarah 2, Sarah 3 mission from Vandenberg. Good night, everybody.